Right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Carrington. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I decided that I wanted to do some video content and share some information about myself and go public and really start talking with people about some very important things and bringing people on to have some conversations about life and business and all the things which makes us professionals. And so I'm licensed in Virginia and Maryland. And but my focus has been on protecting professionals. I'm a therapist. You all are probably service-based professionals, healers, therapists, but protection from being financially exploited. Um, Too many people are in professions, caring professions, helper professions are oftentimes set up for failure when it comes to money and systems. And what I'm seeing my role transferring into is really helping them to get more clarity and protection so that they can thrive and get off of the hamster wheel. And so I thought that I come forward and start having more conversations. And today I wanted to talk to someone that I think is very, very, very enlightened. And his name is Chris Denham. He and I met on a platform called Alignable. And Alignable is a professional networking platform where we meet people, from all over the country. And we met on a um, like Smart Connect. There's a feature called Smart Connect, and it just kind of going through the connections, but I think it was much deeper, the connection that we had together on the Smart Connect. And um, as I got off of the Smart Connect in the call, I realized that there was a synergy and the connection that I had with Chris because we have similar backgrounds and we do know what it feels like to grow up in environments that don't always protect us or keep us safe. And that shared history shows up in similar ways in how we work in terms of our calling of how we want to help people, especially helpers, healers, therapists, clinicians, to get clarity and to achieve that stability that we want in our lives. So I wanted to bring him on to really just have this conversation. I don't think he's just a financial professional. He's more than just that. Um, he's someone that deeply knows and understands and personally, professionally, how some of these systems are operating, financial, political, industrial, occupational, whatever system that we are in as just human beings, and a commitment to create new systems that are going to benefit us. So he's going to talk about his story. I'm going to have a conversation with him, his model, and how he's helping people move out of the survival and into more scalable models. So, Chris, welcome. It's good seeing you, and
Wise.
just wanted, what's that?
I said likewise. Great to be here.
Yeah, yeah. It's always a pleasure connecting with you, and just want to kind of pull back all the layers, right? And
Sure.
just start with you and your story, and based on your comfort level in terms of like where you want to start with your background, a little bit about yourself, and we can segue in terms of how that shaped how you see systems and how do you see stability as a
Right.
result, right? So,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So no, again, thanks. It's always great to have an opportunity to talk about the real stuff, the why, right? I think we all take these journeys on creating businesses or creating something, and we go into it with these ideas, and sometimes we get bogged down with the system. And part of that is the system not really being designed to help you see yourself And so I think that is the fundamental beginning of where I'd like to begin to kind of start and tell my story is um, when I was younger, I had dealt with some abandonment issues as a young kid, right? What I'll share in this story is that my Genesis story is I was a product of a rape. And for 38 years, I never really talked about it, but it was something that I carried with me in every space, right? I tried to kind of put my best face and my game face on every day. And I wouldn't say it was so much something that harbored on my day to day that I thought about, but it definitely substantially impacted trust and my belief system around allowing people in my life and creating space for them to stick around. And so, understanding that that system I was born into, this system and immediately creating an environment of distrust because it was not a safe space to have those kind of conversations were not created before I was, here and around. It's not something that my family, my mother, my elders in my family had a capacity to talk about, right? It was just not something they did. And
Right.
so that I feel is the fundamentals of going through and shielding parts of yourself or not allowing yourself full access to all of you, but not really having the words, I think I became aware of my Genesis story when I was about 4 or 5, but I did not necessarily understand the implications. You don't understand that when you're a young kid about the how, the whys, and all of those things, right? And so as I get older, I was always inquisitive. So asking questions led to a deeper unraveling of
Yeah.
who I am and how I came to be, and
Right.
being in the system. Like education, college, work,
Right. Yeah.
profession, all of those are different forms of the system. And so I got to see different levels of that and how it
Yeah.
became a personal story for me. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's there's so many people that resonate with that, including myself, with being in a space with people, especially because we start with our family systems, right? That's the
right,
first system. This is the systems that we're born into, and you are just a child, and you're in a system where you're people are engaging in behaviors that go against your consent, and really shape how you view safety and stability. And so when your safety and stability is ruptured, it causes you to go into the space of like questioning and being inquisitive and being like all of that tends to happen. And so and I'm so sorry that happened to you, and how it happens to so many young people who grow up in these environments, and they keep moving forward. Like you said, you pursued education, you kept going through life, but then you have this wound of like being violated in this way of your body and like your sense of safety of yourself, and how kind of choice and things were taken away from you in that um but I also I wonder kind of like even in that experience, like the
mhm,
strengths that came out of that for you to keep going forward,
right.
like even if it came out of that hardship or that trauma that you experienced, I'm wondering like what was that for you?
So I think for me, what it was is I just always had this desire to want to help others. And so um, the things that I learned, I would always try work to frame them in a positive frame of if I get through this thing or I learn how to do this thing, then I can teach those around me who may not have had access, may not have the time or the space to gain those tools. And if nothing else, there's a place where someone else can get that resource. So I think that that's the thing that I learned, that my mom and my relatives or my community at home didn't have the tools. They weren't given the tools because the system doesn't readily provide those. So when you're trying to raise children, live your own life, and you're young in your own life, um,
Yeah.
I don't think that the capacity to understand that. So for me, I took it as is like I know that I'm loved, right? That wasn't a question. Like I am loved deeply and to the best of all of my village, my family's capacity. And so as I begin to you see myself growing up and I begin to see reflections of my own experience in the kids that I went to school with, in the people that I go to college with, the people that I become friends and hang out with, the people that I work amongst as colleagues, and realize that what I'm going through, I have a unique perspective, but I am not a unicorn, so to speak, that my experience is alien and that no one else is going through it. And so that begins to start to ask these questions of others around me to assess their lived experience and then
Yeah.
say, well, what am I, how, every time I'm interacting into the system and the world we live in, I'm learning more
Right.
information about myself and about the system.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, that is so that's so much of a thing. We just and I think for you is that's what that resilience is for you. It's like you kept going, you kept growing, you kept wanting to help others despite going through what you experienced in your
I
child.
think
Like you go ahead. Hmm.
I think what I learned is that most people respond and what they know and what is familiar and what is
Hmm.
easiest. And so sometimes being maybe mean or being like nasty or doing something hurtful isn't
Hmm.
indicative of the true essence of who they are. It's that they don't know who
Right.
they are and that there's pain that is
Right.
unprocessed and that pain
Yeah.
comes through in these actions because you don't know how to regulate your emotions. And so you're just kind of acting out. And so it's kind of I don't know where like no one taught me, but it just I'm
Right.
an observer. Like I observe things before I act on them or before I speak on them because I like to
Hmm.
know, what makes sense and not that I'm just kind of speaking wildly, but how can I be helpful? I think that's my approach is how can I be helpful, not hurtful? And so that takes a moment to quiet the ego that of self that
Yeah.
wants to be seen and kind of wants to stick his head out and say, here I am and I know this. And it's like be quiet for a moment and receive because you may also learn this isn't a space that you want to show up in because it's not safe or it's not even
Yeah.
helpful for your own existence, right? And so it's not just
Right.
in the space of others, but in that space for me. And so I think that that was a part of the framing of um, the more I can show up in this positive, helpful way, the better I can become because I don't want to become a monster in the process of fighting a monster that has created these systems that I live in, right? And so I have to be
Yeah.
thoughtful about that.
Mm. You know what my question around that is that, because many of us healers, helpers, therapists have a similar origin story of just kind of being able, like going through some type of trauma or something that may have happened to us. Not all, but most of us have that origin story, and we become these wounded healers, as so to speak. You know what I mean? Wounded healers, because we want to
Yeah.
help, and we are using our wounds to kind of help others. But I wonder, like, was that awareness there for you? And then we can kind of shift it from how, like, your earlier experiences influence your decision to go to school and, like, pursue education or pursue your career in finance and insurance. I wonder if there was an awareness of, like who you were at that particular time, or were you still kind of in this, like, I want to help despite, all of my trauma that just happened to me. I'm just curious how that shows
Uh,
up.
I think I've always known myself pretty well. So that's something I did want to say is as a kid and growing up, I spent a lot of quiet time, not
Mm,
television or those things. I think some of it was limited. Like I feel blessed and fortunate now maybe wasn't the most exciting thing as a kid to not maybe watch TV when you want or play video games when you want. But I
Mm,
understand the value of that now. But I also think that there's a component of me that likes me time, inner time, like inner self time, where I can
sure.
ask myself questions about my own self and come to
Mm,
awarenesses without the world can be very noisy and other people have
mhm,
their own projections and television. And so I think that when you pull in to yourself and you understand yourself, you understand
mm,
about others too, because you're like, oh my God, like when this person responds very angrily or very excited, it resonates in synchronicity within myself because it's like I understand what they feel and empathically that this
yeah.
makes sense. Someone else
Hmm.
experienced death. I know what it's like to experience a death of a relative or a close loved one. So it resonates.
Yeah.
I understand there are different facets of, yeah, if I'm angry, I might say things and just blurt things out. But then it's like, how can I
Mm,
harness that energy? That emotional energy has
yeah.
potential to fuel you. So I think that I chose that.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's another side of that though, where I chose that off more often than not. Like I think there's an elegant
Mm,
balance of sometimes you might need to say that four-letter word and get that expression out to release the energy from your body because what we don't release is held in the body. And so that's where
exactly.
a whole bunch of health issues or just pain and trauma. So
Mm,
I think I became aware of like who I was, even when
right.
others might want me to act or take a certain path in life.
Mm,
And I think kind of going somewhat into my career path, I was always good at math. And teachers and things always said, there aren't very many male teachers of color, and you're good at it, and people listen to you. You're a good teacher. And I was like, yeah, but I don't see a practical sense of teaching math. Like it just,
mm,
I like things that have more of a practical use, like being a trigonometry and calculus. And I'm just teaching kids like conceptual stuff that maybe not necessarily applicable to everyone.
right.
And so that was kind of where I went on the journey of I am open to the possibility of discovering how my desires or my interests and what I'm good at can take me in life. And I think that openness created the
Yeah.
pathway for the evolution because I didn't start
Right.
off as a business or finance person. I actually started off
Sure.
as a computer engineer. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, a computer and electrical engineer. And so I took a couple of
Okay.
classes in my first semester of college and Enron scandal was going on. And I had an intro to business class as well as a computer programming class. In the computer programming class, I realized like I don't want to do any of this. Like this is
Hmm.
not interesting. So I changed
Yeah.
my major and I became a finance major because the Enron was very math because I was taking it was accounting and finance in the intro to business class, kind of a little bit of everything of business. And I was like, ooh, I think this finance is practical.
Hmm.
It's practical
Mm,
and how you live life. And so that was kind of the transition from um, the kind of how I framed what I thought I was going to do going into college and as a professional career. And it changed in that one semester. 9/11 also happened in that same year. So there's a lot of moments, but I would say that was the moment that I knew that finance was going to be where I wanted to be in the business world.
it's interesting how you kind of like you're conceptualizing your experiences like having this empath identity of just being like very in tune with yourself and others, but at the same time having these parts of yourself that would not be it's like you have this empath thing going over here where you're like in tune, but then you have this these finance math, technical parts of yourself
Right.
in one person, right? And so it's interesting because you don't hear that oftentimes with like empathic financial or math people. Like you don't hear those things in the same space. It's almost like very opposing spaces. But for you, it was that was all
That's
in
part of the
one.
system.
That was part of your system, right?
Yeah, the
Right.
system
So
at large teaches you to separate that they don't exist. Like you're either one or the
yes.
other, and that's not true. Like you're both. The proportions are going to be different for each of us. And I think that that's where we don't have that conversation that you're either left or right side of the brain, that whole
Mm-hmm.
mantra. And that is really just conditioning to establish a set of beliefs that is beneficial to someone that isn't you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you
Mm-hmm.
start to understand
Mm-hmm.
these industrial complexes
Yes.
reside within the system because we all live in every system. Like nature is a system, right? And there are
Mm-hmm.
laws and principles that govern how flowers bloom and how trees grow and
Mm-hmm.
how animals give birth. Like all of those things are governed by a system of principles. And so
Yeah.
everything in life can be looked back to as there is a system here. And so every system is designed to get the result that it is getting. And so we often think that the system is broken. And it's like, well, who is the system being designed to serve? Is how we need to ask the question. And
Mm-hmm.
following the money kind of shows us who and where that's.
Yeah. And that right there, I want you to speak to that a little bit because so you are a person who has within your inner system, like you have all
Mhm,
these different parts intact, and you were aware of these parts, but then you entered into a world and an industry of finance and insurance
mhm.
that, and we talked about this in another call about just this sense of capturing and an extraction, but this promise of stability and security and safety. And but knowing that that's who you are, but then interacting with a system that is not, that's very siloed. What did you notice about how these systems actually treat people in them?
So what I'd say is in all of my understanding of self, I didn't understand how I came to be, right? So I want to also kind of
Mm,
clarify a little bit of that while I was understanding myself, I was also interacting with others of other, people in all facets of my life, my home system, my school system, my work system. I don't know that I was acutely aware of how I came to be in terms of how I was showing up. I think that that was a discovery that evolved the more exposure I had to other people. And I think that were also outside of my community, right? Because in the community, especially as a black male growing up in one facet of, you know, coming from a sense of lack, right? Lack financial, lack, and that there was a transition later in life where, I came from being, low income a family to middle class, right? So, but I saw what that experience is like, but I don't
right.
know what it's like personally because I'm growing up in my own parents' cocoon. And so it isn't until you
Mm,
go outside of that cocoon and you start
yeah.
to experience life for yourself. And so that didn't happen until college, right? Because then
Mm-hmm.
you're starting to move out on your own and do things more autonomously. And so it begins to test the belief system that is installed in you. So I think it
Right.
was once I got into my career, I started to question subconsciously where my belief system came from, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Where did my parents get that from? Well, where did I get it from? That's
Yeah.
the inner work of myself. And then where did my
Yeah.
parents get it? And then when I begin to encounter other people of my
Mm-hmm.
community of color
Mm-hmm.
or not, I could extrapolate what those pockets of society look like and what systems supported or did not support them. And then there's usually residual signs that say when you have a lack of A, B, and C, this result ensues. And when you have A, B, and C, this result ensues more frequent and often. And so I don't think it didn't just, I understood those things. I think I understood
Yeah.
myself well, but I didn't understand the why of,
Mm,
well, the why. And I think I only learned that through experience of interacting with others against a spectrum of lived experiences, because then I can query those those perspectives. Like, oh, you come from a very different, you're an Indian who's from the, East Indian or West Indian. You are, African from Africa. You are um, uh, Caucasian and you come from, from Ireland, or you're American. And so each of those comes with a different inherent nuance. And I begin to see correlations. And then those correlations always kind of went back to lack of money and understanding how
Mm,
money worked and the system of
mm-hmm.
money. And I think that as a person who was already interested in finance from college, I
Right.
dreamed the dream of actually going into money management. And so that was where I ended up in treasury. And so I had, spent 20 years almost in corporate treasury and various financial institutions, mostly in insurance space. And so you begin to even understand even more
Mm-hmm.
about highly regulated environments. And so,
Mm-hmm.
treasury, corporate treasury is the space that manages money. And so, when you
Mm-hmm.
understand how money works, now I can take those same principles and apply them to my personal life, apply them to communities, and begin to see a picture of systems that either work for
Mm-hmm.
or against um, different different goals, right? So my goal is to
Yeah.
do X, but your goal is to do Y, and you're in my system. Well, the system isn't designed to get you the result you want, not
Yeah.
optimally anyway. And so that was kind of where more understanding and creating us a framework of systems of I understood that I understand systems well, like because I could see the big
Yeah.
picture. We
Mm-hmm.
often antidote what we see from our friends and our family members, and
Mm-hmm.
that's proximity, right? And
Right.
that's a very limited scope of an environment to do a litmus test on how a world or an environment works. And so I think
Yeah.
my broad exposure to multiple demographics, multiple socioeconomic communities through my career afforded me an opportunity to see on large scale how
Mm,
systems work for or against different groups of people or different goals. And I think that's is what we don't realize. Like, what's the goal of education? We let someone else determine what the goal of education is, and we put our kids in schools, and we don't get the desired outcomes that we want in life. Well, we have to ask ourselves, was the system that you went through designed to yield the result that you were looking for?
yeah. And it's again, it's this like interplay with your system having this like inner curiosity,
Hmm.
even and that kind of coming out, like you were always very kind of curious and insightful and like just inquisitive, and like these parts of you, right, in your system, despite the hardship that in your family system, you still had that intact. But then even stepping out of that system and going into another system, a more global system, of finance and insurance, it's almost like you expanded
Hmm.
your curiosity even more, of just wanting to learn and be curious about and have more experiences in the more expanded edition of the systems which are playing out. So that's what I'm hearing you say in terms
Yeah.
of, because oftentimes I want to name something here is that, especially with us, we have this blind optimism that tends to be very present in us in terms of, um, I think it might be unconscious or subconscious, but just like this optimism about what the world or what the reality could be. And it's leading me into my next question of just like, you know, because in previous conversations we talked about like even with your understanding of all the systems, and you named it um as unhealthy and toxic and exploitative, and you know and I'm wondering like what was the wheels turning in your mind, the turning point where you realized that you couldn't keep operating inside this system that you are learning about, and there's things that are happening in the system, and then you needed to build something different.
Yeah. So I want to say that there's probably a multitude of things that happen, but I believe COVID for myself was a the period we were in the pandemic was a period of opportunity to go even deeper because we live in a world of so many distractions that, our phones constantly going off, our watches and notifications going off, our text messages, our emails, and, the doom scrolling on social media and, YouTube University when you want to learn something new and what you need to learn new is more about you and not something you need to go online. So I think in the space of that, prefacing this, I had an heightened awareness or sensitivity because what I'll say is what I've experienced oftentimes, and I think this is an important share, is I didn't necessarily process the emotional impact of these things. And I think that that is what afforded me the ability to continue to show up in spaces and places that may not have been designed to help me. Um, but I could still thrive in them to a degree that outwardly speaking looks very successful. And I would say I qualified it myself that way, but I wasn't. How successful is that if you're not processing what you're feeling in real
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a delay processing, like in grief, someone passing, and then I have to go back to work in 3 to 5 days. Well, what if my grief, because the nature of the relationship and the dynamic called for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, do I have the space and place to grieve? So that was one of the things that happened in COVID, and it made me ask myself the next time in life, I pray that no one passes prematurely or in recent times but that I have the space to do that. And so a chain of events happened, and then George Floyd, the murdering of George Floyd happens, and it is very public. And so personally, I've never seen the video, but what happened is there was a awareness of the entire world because the world was in lockdown of feeling like I'm seen. And I think that was
Mm.
the time where the emotional floodgates opened because it's like, it feels safe enough to open up and explore these aspects of myself that yeah, I'm aware I'm black and I'm aware I'm a male and I'm aware I'm in America and that there are often this second class citizen feeling
Mm-hmm.
and safety and security that is not afforded me of am I in this? Is this safe? Is it after dark? Can I not wear certain kinds of clothing that might be comfortable but not safe because I need to be readily visible to others so I don't appear threatening, right? And so this was kind of a moment of a cathartic moment. And in that cathartic moment, there were awarenesses about myself that I had an opportunity to process a lot. Um, and I got emotional in a way that I'd never gotten emotional before. And that was kind of the moment where I decided, like, I've seen enough of how systems can be predatorily designed to take advantage of blind spots of people in a system that aren't aware that the system is functioning and operating because they're multi-pronged components of systems. And if you aren't aware how one system is interconnected with another, you can think about strategy, right? Because that's a strategy of how something is connected or planned connection to something that I was, for myself, was like, I've seen a lot of business owners not have access to money as a resource, right? And so wealth became a big thing of do you have the space to be able to sit at home or with your family to go through whatever it is you're going through in real time so that you emerge a healed, more whole version of yourself and not a more fractured version of yourself after each new traumatic experience that you go through that you have chance to process it out. And so that George
Yeah.
Floyd kind of became the culmination or the battle cry, if you will. And through that
Yeah.
battle cry, I begin to look at, I see systems. And so, what if I can now take this and create systems for others of how to manage wealth or to take their vision as a fuel and create something that perpetually grows and takes care of them, right? You plant an
Mm-hmm.
apple seed. When that tree grows, you don't get one apple. You get an
Mm-hmm.
abundance or a bushel of apples, right? Which is, so what if we did that? What if I did that? What if I was that seed and I planted myself and others in the information of how systems work and strategy, then they can produce and multiply. And then you can begin to have conversations more around healing and the inner work that we often exclude because we're too distracted and we have to make money to support ourselves.
And you know what? Thank you so much for sharing that because you know what's crazy is that George Floyd changed so many people's lives. It was revolutionary for a lot of us.
Mhm.
And for you, it sounded like you moved. So you have these parts like the finance part and then this empath part of you that's just like emotional and like sensitive and it like this um history groundbreaking moment of George Floyd and that happening shifted you more into that more empath, having the financial background, of course, but more of that empath, like, oh, I need to shift out of this system, financial system, and into another system or create a new system that is going to like support all sides of myself as you help other people support all sides of themselves. And so that's understandable in that reaction to the situation because I too, in I'm not even in the financial space,
Mhm.
but in 2021, that's when I started my private practice. So it's almost like this because I was on the empath side of building out that identity, right? And so I shifted from being just a therapist to
Yeah.
being a therapist in private practice and focusing on the more operational and financial side of the business of therapy. So it's interesting how like around that timing of George Floyd, we both had that very juxtaposed. I don't know what the word is of like you're more on the finance side, moving more on the empath side, and I'm more on the empath side, moving on the financial
I
side.
think it's a
So
journey to wholeness, right? That I think that the
yeah,
systems
yeah,
design us to
absolutely.
be fragmented and that all of myself, I'm not enough, right? And so if I'm not enough,
Right.
then I don't have enough. And so that
Mm-hmm.
it creates this space where we ultimately share aspects of ourselves, but not all of ourselves, because
Right.
um, we're not taught that our belief system isn't designed to support that, and so I think that that is where we bump into that is that what we're both talking about is coming from two different angles of wholeness, right? Like there is a
Mm-hmm.
holistic view of what does it take to have all of the essentials, um,
Mm-hmm.
that I need in life. And that's not just a financial component, that is a communal, a familial, a spiritual, financial, like it's multidimensional and right. And it takes a
Mm-hmm.
system to be able to give you those things, but you have to first assess do why I need this. And I think many of us come into this realization later in life that you work to a certain point and then you retire, and that we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at Social Security, our 401ks, or the very few of us who might have pensions working in government roles, but
Mm-hmm.
long gone from from the private sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about that, it's like, hey, I'm going to retire at 60 something years old. And it's like, but do I have to retire at 60 something, right? The system kind of creates this pathway to do that. And it makes it
Mm-hmm.
very easy to follow that path. It's kind of color by number. But what if what
Mm-hmm.
you need does not align with that time horizon? And what if you could build it sooner, right? What if you could give yourself
Right.
access to the time to do whatever you wanted when you needed it and and not have to
Mm-hmm.
delay gratification, right? Because that's what it is. You're delaying rest for the sunset years of your life. So I think that that was it is what if I can be whole today and I can enjoy all of me today and not have to, delay.
Yeah, I like that. I love that understanding of it. And just how you describe, like in the model that you've created for clinicians in practice, to the difference between the bare essentials, which is
Mhm.
the survival apparatus, right? Where we're scraping by, we're just living paycheck to paycheck, we are just doing the best what we can with the resources that we have. That's just the bare essentials. And systemically, because of the way in which we've been conditioned and programmed, this is the survival mindset that we have, or the scarcity mindset, really.
Right.
But in the scalable system, which is what you're proposing, is you know being able to kind of think about uh not just the present, but also the future of retirement and planning and strategy and scalable systems where you can sustain consistent results with what you're working with, the resources that you're working with. So taking you beyond the present and into the
Right.
future, right? So yeah, and then also just like the capacity, like not just the clinician capacity, but in terms of our ability to just show up as therapists, but also the financial capacity for us to show up financially as therapists. You know, I want to ask you, how do you see those interacting, and what happens when one is strong and the other is weak?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I like to lean back and say I was afforded the opportunity during COVID to look back at my life, right? During the pandemic, what have you, to really look back at my life and do an audit and say what worked well, and what would I like to change, and not from a retrospective of I was appreciative of every experience I had, helped create this version of me that had the awareness that I have the power and the ability to shape and mold the future before me, right? I wasn't aware of that ability when I was younger, right? And I was still able to accomplish my goals and dreams. So
Hmm.
imagine now with a hyper focus of I can be more intentional about how I use my life force to achieve the desired results that I want, and also know
Hmm.
my value, right? So I think that self audit of what is my self worth, what does it cost me to
Right.
occupy certain spaces and places, and then when you layer that in the context of how do I want to see my life? This is the vision. And I think this is what's important that we need to provide more to the youth is we need to keep them curious instead of saying kids are all over the place. It's like, what is the curiosity? Let them go down the rabbit hole because the more curious you are about something and you're passionate about that, you're going to show up
Hmm.
to do more, to understand more, to do more. And even when you fail or have a setback, you're more resilient in showing up because there is something innately interesting in that, right? And so
Hmm.
when you think about that from a how do I want to live my life? The vision is you have to install the vision first because the vision is where am I trying to go? Where is this life journey trying to take me? Right?
Hmm.
And so the vision is I have this great vision for myself of what I want to create, what I want in my community, what I want to see in other, marginalized communities to have. And I have
Sure.
access to that knowledge and expertise, and that I want to be the change that I see in the world. So then how do I create space for that? And I think that that was kind of the turning point of needing to leave my corporate job in order to do
Mhm.
this mission, right? Because I'm uniquely charged with this mission for myself, then
Right.
this is propelling me. So this mission is the goal to help those along
Hmm.
the way while I'm giving myself the access of freedom financially to be able to have as much time as I need and then be able to teach others to do that same. And so I realized that there are multiple components. There's the me side. What's my capacity on a daily basis to show up for me? What do I need on a daily basis to feel seen, to feel heard? And so
Hmm.
where's that sacred time with self on a daily basis, right? Um,
Mm,
and that is how I understand my ability to show up for others, right? And so
yeah.
gaming when my glass is full, half empty. And then the next component is that what are the tools that I have? What am I good at? And what resources do I have access to, right? I understand how systems work. Connecting with people and understanding how people feel about things and being able to talk about things that might be shameful or be stigma and induced. So that freeness allows others to be liberated to talk about those things. And so now I understand self, I understand the tools I have. And so now I can begin to be intentional about how I leverage me as a resource to get the result that I want and creating a strategy. I know how the system works. I don't have the individual ability to change that system, but I can exploit aspects of it to produce the result that is more aligned with the vision that I want for myself, a vision that doesn't involve a lot of pain and trauma or lack. And so it's with that as I'm giving it myself, I'm looking to show others how do you take what you already have, which is yourself, the innate skills within you, right? Whatever gifts you have, and then taking that and creating a strategy to create a plan for how you use your finances to create abundance, right? How money works. Where do you put your money? And what are the systems, whether it's an attorney, whether it's an accountant, whether it's just friends that you can have these conversations around to find access to those resources. It's the strategy. Like systems include strategies. Like someone planned for the system that you're operating in to exist the way it did, right?
You know what? I think there are so many financial professionals, even just service-based professionals that can learn a lot from you in the business world, just because you have those parts of you that feel and that care. Um, and there's people that are in private practice and not just therapists, but attorneys and other healthcare professionals that could really benefit from hearing more about your vision for your model. And I'm wondering, like, if you can imagine 5 years ahead, what impact do you hope for your model and your work will have on the world of private practice?
So I've dreams of grandeur, right? So I think that's what has propelled me is like the hopeful optimism that I have. I have a practical approach. So what I would say to that is that I would hope that my hope and my belief is that I will be successful in creating a system that produces a culture, right? Because I think what we're talking about, the system, is a culture of resources, of wholeness for self, and that the practices will create access and opportunities for others. So what I'm learning, I'm giving back, right? And so it's kind of, you know, lift as I climb. As I move to the next level, I'm creating access and pathways for others to go down that same path with less resistance and less trauma or less obstacles than I did, right? Here's how you navigate this space. And so it is my view that I will help hundreds of practices. I, if I had to stick a number on it, I'd like in the next 3 years, I'd love to help at least 200 practices have their owners, clinician owners, to create more time for themselves, more time to enjoy life, and more time to enjoy the practices that they have created. and that they will instill others to see them as a beacon of a pathway, right? That another clinician coming up through the ranks or is interested in practicing will ultimately see this as a school of how I can learn how to be, right? Not just
Mhm.
making money and going home and spending that money, but to be inspired, right? And so that's my view is to inspire others to create businesses that others will be inspired to join and then replicate, right? So that's it. Capacity
Yeah.
building, scale. That's scaling. Teaching someone else how to do what I do allows me to go learn something new. And then that person teaching that person how to teach someone what they've learned to teach it to the next person. And so that's the multiplication and exponential growth field experience. That's my view of creating that in clinicians and private practices is to teach them those skills to duplicate what they know.
That's so powerful. And you know what? Just on behalf of the mental health community, we're going to designate you as the honorary sexual therapist because that is you all day. And I hope that people can hear more about your story and your journey and your experience. And I appreciate you for sharing it from your past, your family background, to how you entered into the field finance and the world that you entered into, and to your observation and insights on how these systems operate and how you're building out healthier models for healers and practitioners and therapists because we need it. We need it. And I think that there needs to be more conversation.
I
Um,
I
this
think I
needs to
just
be
want
broadcast. Go ahead.
one thing I would like to say that maybe I didn't is that another big moment of the rubber meeting the road is when George Floyd happened. What happened within me was also work that realized that I needed to talk to someone too, because I was not uniquely equipped to deal with all of the sensory overload of what I discovered from a lifelong personal journey. Um, and so that was where I began the journey to look for a therapist, a Black male therapist. And that was kind of a big challenge of not finding that and saying, well, therapists in general, they go out of business because they don't know how to manage cash flow, whether they have positive cash flow or they're struggling with cash flow. And being someone in treasury who manages that, it was like I'm uniquely positioned to solve that. So over the process of finding a therapist, I was able to personally get the help I needed, but also learn about the community that is my breakout community to say they need the skills that I have. And so um, that's a passion that I can get behind and create a mission for. And so I think that that's really where the charge was, is that while I'm healing from childhood things, I can also create space for when someone else like me needs to seek help, that they can get the help that they need to be in the mental space to be able to grow a business, to start a business, to sustain a business, because it takes a lot of mental wherewithal. And if you're dealing with a lot of trauma and baggage that's unresolved, it's going to be very hard to move through and accomplish the things you want in life. So that was like the
Beautiful.
crystallization of I want to do more, but how and where? And that was the how and the where.
It's awesome. That's so important. And congratulations
Thank you.
to you and getting the help that you need and getting the support that you need so you can do this great work that you're doing for those like myself who are helping others. And so that's the ecosystem, right? And
Yeah. Takes a
this
village.
protection, this protection, is needed. And it's not just about numbers,
Yeah.
it's about the capacity building and the system building to give clarity and safety and freedom to grow in the way in which we want to grow. So
And that's
I just go ahead.
no, I said that would be what I would like to leave with is that when you're
Mhm,
working with any professional, but it's
mhm,
specifically a financial professional and it's in your business, I think it's paramount that you're building a business that is designed for the lifestyle that you want for yourself and not just telling you about here's the financial ratios that you need to be in, like you need EBITDA to be between 20% and those things, because those benchmarks are great benchmarks. But
Right.
if those benchmarks you exhibit in your business, but it's still operational, painstaking, you have to show up in the weeds, you have to be strategy, you have to be all the things in order to maintain it. Is that the lifestyle that is most beneficial for you? And so you want to find someone who blends the personal, like your business should wrap around your life and shouldn't be your life wrapping around your business. That would be the people who take you to the next level, is teaching you how to have the thing you want, but still enjoy all of the privileges that life has to offer you.
Wow. Powerful, masterful. Chris, thank you so much for
Thank you
doing
for having me.
this. Oh my
Thank you for having
gosh,
me.
this is so amazing. You are amazing. You are awesome. And I hope you just keep going. And I hope that those who are listening to this and watching this, that you take this note as encouragement and support and wisdom and strength and reach out to Chris because he is very intelligent and knows a lot. And you do not have to do this alone. You have support. We have support in our own communities. We have to stop working in silos. We need to work together. And we don't have to stay in the bare essentials. We don't have to stay in scarcity mindset. We don't have to stay in the survival mode. And we have to know that. And we have to get the help that we need and the support that we need to get out of that so that we can operate in abundance in the way that we practice. And that is the way forward. And that is the solution. And that is what we need moving forward in the way that we operate. So, Chris, thank you. And it's always a pleasure chatting with you. And so hopefully, if you have any other thoughts, comments, please share this out to everyone. Get the word out. I think that will support both of us, Chris and I. And yeah, so until next time, thank you again and
Thank you, Jonathan.
appreciate
It's
you
been a
for all
pleasure.
listening. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. All right.
All right. Mhm.